choosing the best cars that Italy has ever produced, well, it's a bit like being asked which puppy you want to save from the rescue centre. Is there actually a correct answer? I mean, sure, one of them has 3 legs and can't control its bladder, but it's still extremely lovable. So we've decided to approach this slightly differently. These are the Italian cars that we think are the most significant, the cars that have played a pivotal role in how the motor car has developed. And that means that we have cars that pioneered mass production of motoring for the populace, and those out-of-reach hypercars that just made us fall in love with motoring. Say the Fiat 500 to the Ferrari F40. So, here we go with... The F40 is as beloved as it is excellent, as achingly cool as it is state-of-the-art, or at least was. A million imaginations were captured the moment this mightily 1980s design appeared on the road. Following on from the 288 GTO as Ferrari's halo car, the F40 had a completely different approach. It wasn't aiming for rally homologation. Oh no, the F40 wanted to be the ultimate road car. It was officially a celebration of the 40th birthday of Ferrari, hence the name. But in reality, it was an attempt to put 2 Italian fingers up to Porsche's 959. The 288 had been eclipsed in technological terms by its German rival, and Ferrari wanted to be back on top. When it arrived, the Pininfarina design could not have been more different than the 288 if it tried. Goodbye wedges, hello squared angles, goodbye sleek lines, hello massive rear wing. It was a car basically designed to make schoolchildren excited. But underneath, the F40 meant business for adults too. Wishbone suspension, coil springs, hydraulic dampers, centre-locking speed lines, split rims, and bespoke Pirelli P0 tyres. The interior was so Spartan that the first batch of cars even had sliding perspex windows. The door catches were just a simple bit of wire. It wasn't shocking to hear that the F40 weighed just 1,100 kilograms. And then there was what propelled it, a 90-degree V8 engine that was related to the one found in the 288. A small 81cc capacity increase was the major immediate change, but with sophisticated water-cooled turbos supplied by the same team that worked on the F1 cars came 490 horsepower and a top speed of 201 miles per hour. It was agile, it was light, it was well set up. When on the road, it was quite arguably the world's first hypercar. And before we move on, I'd just like to remind you that if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and then you can see everything that we do here at Goodwood Road and Racing. Firing us all the way to the other end of the 20th century is the Lambda, surely one of the best looking cars of its era, but also one of the most technologically advanced. The list of things the Lambda pioneered is pretty impressive. The first car to be built with a unitary body, a pioneer of independent suspension, shock absorbers, and brakes on all 4 wheels. The last one might seem a bit odd, but for context, most early cars only regarded the rear axle as needing brakes. Times have changed. Over its life, 9 versions of the Lambda were created, and 11,200 cars were sold. And for a bit more context in all this, the unitary body was basically the first monocoque. And a good 40 years later, there were competition sports cars that were still built without one. The engine was also a marvel, the first use of what would become Lancia's staple V4, producing an impressive, for the time, 70 horsepower. It had a tiny V angle, just 13 degrees when it first arrived, and stretched to a yawning 14 by the end of its life. This V4 would continue to be developed by Lancia well into the second half of the 20th century. Not only did the Lambda look great, albeit a little bit like, Brum after he's seen something truly appalling, but it was actually decades ahead of its time. Long before BMW started making M cars, or Mercedes worked with AMG, or Audi's sport division was a dream, Alfa Romeo was taking its more ordinary cars and making full-on performance versions available to the general public. The starting point to this one was pretty decent already. The Giulia had a stunning body from Bertone, giving it some extra beefy bits and making it go like stink just added to the pure desirability. The beefier body was crafted with a new alloy of aluminium, magnesium, manganese, copper and zinc to be exceptionally light. With magnesium wheels, perspex windows and aluminium suspension components thrown in, this was a serious machine. Even the door handles were crafted to be lighter than normal. All told, the GTA weighed just 740 kilograms. That's where the name GTA arrived. Gran Turismo Alleggerita, meaning lightened Gran Tourer. Stick a legendary engine under the bonnet, in this case Alfa Romeo's stunning twin-spark 1500cc unit fed with a pair of Weber carburetors, and it was a potent mix. This is no tarted-up family machine. The GTA had proper performance chops. And perform it Giulia did. Factory outfit Auto Delta won European Touring Car Championship titles 3 years in a row. And when the ludicrously desirable GT-AM arrived later, it added a couple more. Sounds a lot like a racing car. Yes? Well, there was a Stradale version made for you and I to cruise around in on the roads, and we would even today struggle to think of anything more effortlessly cool to turn up in than a GTA. Well, maybe this? Much like when we did the video on the greatest supercars of the 1960s, it would be impossible to make this one without mentioning the Miura. I mean, this is the car that pretty much invented a whole new class of car, the first supercar. This was the culmination of that legendary, and at least in part apocryphal story of Ferruccio Lamborghini trying to get back at Enzo Ferrari for his cars not working properly. The Miura took what was going on over in Modena and, well, quite honestly, wiped the floor with it. While Enzo stubbornly stuck to his guns, as he had in F1 to his team's detriment, that mid-engine cars were just not for road use, a trio of engineers working in secret because actually Mr. Lamborghini agreed with Ferrari, came up with something to change the world. Engineers Paolo Stanzini, Bob Wallace, and Gianpaolo Dallara, yes, that Dallara, set about creating what would be the genesis of every supercar to follow. It was revealed as a PR stunt at the Geneva Motor Show in 1966, wrapped in a masterpiece from Gandini. With its 3.9-litre V12 at the back cast in one piece with the gearbox, inspired by the way by the Mini, the Miura had tech to back up its beauty, and the idea that it wouldn't be produced was very quickly dismissed. Eventually, even Ferrari had to admit that maybe this was the future. Perhaps one thing tougher than starting up a car company in the 1990s was starting up a supercar company in Italy in the 1990s without just buying an existing legendary name. The country was just awash with automotive legacy, so who really needed anything brand new? Well, former Lamborghini designer Horacio Pagani believed that the need was real, and, having left Lamborghini after a bit of a disagreement, spent 7 years developing what would become to this day his masterpiece. The first version, the C12, looked a lot like a fighter jet when it arrived, all angular and blessed with a bubble-like cockpit. A breath of fresh air after a decade of pretty blobby designs. Topping it off was that quad exhaust layout sat in the middle of its rear. And, like the Miura, the Zonda had the power to match those stunning looks. With an engine sourced from AMG slotted into that rear, that V12 became something of a legend. Initially, it was sold with a 6-litre engine, but only a handful of cars were made with that before it was enlarged to a stunning 7 litres for the following C12S. Now, just 2 years later, the Zonda had 550 horsepower and would hit 62 miles an hour in 3.7 seconds. Since then, each revision to the Zonda has either heightened its desirability or slowly ruined it. Depends on your outlook. But that original Zonda is still one of the most stunning moments in motoring history. These last few sections of this video should probably come with some kind of content warning. Maybe we stick a too hot for YouTube label on the thumbnail or something, I don't know. Because Miura then Zonda is not enough. To follow it up with the Countach? Whew, that's just filth. The Countach was actually quite innovative. It had an all-steel space frame chassis and a longitudinally mounted V12 engine, but we all remember it for one thing and one thing only, how it looks. The Countach, yes that's Countach, was a replacement for the Miura, quite the daunting job role. When it became clear that the Miura was a bit too long in the tooth to be updated, a crack team within Lamborghini, including Bob Wallace and Paolo Stanzini again, set upon making a car that would best their former masterpiece. The idea was to keep some of the Miura's best bits and lose the bits they didn't like. Correctly, the uneven weight distribution that the first mid-engine supercar had suffered from, and its poor stability at high speeds. Both Miura and Countach were supercars, but where the Miura leant towards the Grand Touring end, the Countach was going for sports car. What was created was just as much of an icon as its predecessor. The Countach, whether you're a fan of the cleaner original or more drawn to the more muscular, bewinged car of the later years, is on almost every petrolhead's list of dream cars. Pop-up headlights, wedge shape, V12, Lamborghini badge, it's just achingly awesome. Many motoring journalists will tell you that the Ferrari 458 Speciale is the finest car that Ferrari has ever produced. That, of course, makes it one of the best cars that Italy has ever produced. In fact, I can quote directly from Evo magazine when it said, "Of all the significant drivers' cars we've experienced over the last 25 years, one stands above all others. Ladies and gentlemen, the sublime, unsurpassed 458 Speciale." And plenty of brands have found out over the years just how hard Evo magazine can be to please. Like the 360 Challenge Stradale and 430 Scuderia that preceded it, and the 488 Pista that followed, the initial recipe was simple. Take Ferrari's latest mid-engine supercar and make it the very best driving machine possible. Perhaps more importantly, this was the final naturally aspirated V8 Ferrari, so quite a pinch point in Italian motoring history. Taking the 458 Italia to begin with, the boffins at Ferrari stripped out the interior and lightened the glass and engine cover, dropping a full 90 kilograms over the standard car. The V8 was tweaked so it had 600 horsepower at a screaming 9,000 RPM and more fiddling cut gearshift times by 44%. Overall, it was an electrifying mixture, a salute to the history of naturally aspirated Ferraris and a nod toward the future hurtling towards us with the addition of aids like side-slip control. Whether any Ferrari that followed has quite managed to capture the essence of the Speciale, we're not quite so sure. Not only does the Giulia Quadrifoglio remain one of our favourite cars on sale to this very day, it represents just so much more than, just being a really good hot saloon. This is the rebirth of Alfa Romeo, the point at which it woke up from a slumber that seemed to hark right back to the 156. In the intervening years, we'd had pretty cars that lacked much else beyond that, like the 159 or the Giulietta, or perhaps even more heinously the 4C. Never underrate Alfa Romeo's historic ability to cock things up. But the Giulia Quadrifoglio, that was the most chef's kiss of cars. The standard Giulia was probably the best looking saloon car on sale, and with plenty of manufacturers intent on just disappearing into a fight for who can make the most impactful but often least pretty cars, it is still nowhere near being beaten. And what Alfa Romeo did was give it quad exhausts, bigger arches, bigger wheels, a beefier bumper, skirts and rear and a diffuser. Oh, and shove an incredible V6 under the bonnet that was derived from the V8s found in Ferraris. And not only did it look and sound great, it could go toe-to-toe with its rivals, especially when it was eventually facelifted and given a real honest-to-goodness mechanical limited-slip diff. 510 horsepower is more than enough when it goes to just the rear wheels. The Giulia felt magnificent to slip through some European roads and looked achingly cool when parked up in town. While we're sure an M3 or an RS4 will get you to the destination faster and the C63 will undoubtedly make more fuss while doing so, the Giulia, that's the one that'll leave us happiest at the end of the day. A tiny two-door Italian car with an asthmatic air-cooled engine mounted where the boot should be is hardly the recipe for a machine found on a list that includes the Countach or the Miura. But in pure terms, there's no way you could do a list of the most important cars in Italian history without including the Fiat 500. In fact, it'd have to be on a list of the greatest cars full stop. Although the 500 that you know is actually the second generation. The first car to be called 500 was launched in 1936 and quickly became known as the Topolino because of its similarity, allegedly, to the looks of Mickey Mouse. Topolino means little mouse in Italian, and that was the Italian nickname for Disney's main character. We'll let you decide if that was fair. After 500,000 Topolinos had been made, the pressure was on to make its replacement when Fiat finally decided to move on from the first 500 in 1955. The replacement was as innovative as it was cute, with a tiny 500cc engine rear-mounted for extra space inside. Despite being tiny, the Fiat 500, by the way, is under 3 metres long and just 1.3 metres wide, it was actually really rather practical thanks to its brilliant packaging. It would continue to be sold all the way until 1975 with various visions created that included estates, luxury versions and even the slightly bonkers Jolly. So ingenious was it that designer Dante Giacosa was given the prestigious Compasso d'Oro prize for industrial design. In fact, so popular was it that any worries Fiat might have had about continuing the success of the Topolino were incredibly unfounded. Never mind selling 500,000, 3.8 million 500s were made and sold. Those we think are the best and greatest Italian cars ever made. But what have we missed? What should be on there? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget, if you did enjoy it, pop a like on the video and subscribe so you see everything from Goodwood Road and Racing.